Ambassador Yuna had seen many species in her long life. For 30 years, she had traveled across the galaxy, visiting worlds that most beings could only dream about. She had walked on planets made of ice and fire. She had spoken with creatures who lived in the depths of gas giants. She had watched empires rise and fall like waves on a cosmic ocean. But none of that mattered now. Her people were dying. The Valori Collective was caught between two great powers. The hegemony came from the galactic north, with their massive warships and their cold, calculating generals. The Dominion rose from the south, breeding soldiers in vats and teaching them to die without question. These two empires had been fighting for over a century, and they had chosen Valori space as their battlefield. Yuna's people were not warriors. They were diplomats, scientists, and healers. They had silver skin that shimmered in starlight, and 4 eyes that could see colors humans could not imagine. They lived for 300 years and spent most of that time seeking knowledge. War was something they studied in history books, not something they experienced. Now war had found them anyway. The Council of Elders had given Yuna one mission: find a champion. Find someone from another species who could fight for the Valori, someone fierce enough and clever enough to turn the tide of this endless war. They gave her the fastest ship in their fleet and unlimited resources. They gave her their blessing and their desperate hope. For 2 years, she searched. She visited the warrior clans of the Torvak first. They were massive creatures, standing over 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin like stone. They had conquered their entire star system through pure strength. Yuna watched them train, watched them fight, and saw their fatal weakness. They were too predictable. They charged forward, always forward, and the hegemony's tactical computers would analyze their patterns within hours. Next, she found the assassin guilds of the Nephra. They were small and quick, with skin that could change color and blend into any background. They could kill without being seen and vanish like smoke. But Yuna watched one of their best fighters die when a simple explosion brought down a building around her. The Nephra were fragile. One lucky shot, one unexpected blast, and they shattered like glass. The siege masters of the Grelox could crack open fortified cities like eggs. They built machines of destruction that made Yuna's hearts sink with despair. But they were slow, so very slow. By the time they finished building their weapons, the war would move somewhere else. Speed was life in this conflict, and the Grelox did not understand speed. Yuna was beginning to lose hope when her ship detected a distress beacon. It came from an uncharted system at the edge of explored space. The signal was weak, primitive, using technology that the Valori had abandoned centuries ago. A navigation officer advised against investigating. They were far from friendly territory, and the signal could be a trap. But Yuna had spent 30 years reading the hearts of other beings. Something in that signal called to her. Something desperate and determined and utterly refusing to die. She ordered her ship to investigate. They found a small vessel tumbling through an asteroid field. It was barely larger than a shuttle, with a hole patched so many times it looked like scar tissue. The engine was failing. The life support was failing. Everything was failing, but the pilot was not. Yuna watched through her ship's sensors as the vessel dodged asteroids with movements that should have been impossible. The pilot was calculating trajectories in real time, using a navigation computer that was clearly broken, making tiny adjustments with thrusters that barely worked. When a rock clipped the hull and tore open a section, she saw the pilot seal the breach with emergency foam and his own burned hands. He did not scream. He did not cry. He simply fixed the problem and kept flying. For 11 hours, she watched him survive. When the oxygen began to run low, the pilot did not panic. He slowed his breathing, entering some kind of meditative state that reduced his body's needs. He rationed his remaining air with mathematical precision, calculating exactly how long he could last and pushing himself to that limit and beyond. Yuna had never seen anything like it. When her ship finally managed to catch the vessel in a tractor beam and bring it aboard, the pilot was barely conscious. His skin was pale, his lips were blue, and frost had begun to form on his eyelashes. But his eyes were open. His eyes were watching her as she entered the airlock. He was human. Yuna had heard of his species, but had never met one before. They came from a small planet called Earth in a system that most galactic powers considered worthless. They were young as species went, barely having left their own world. They were fragile, short-lived, and possessed none of the natural advantages that other species had evolved. And yet this one had survived, something that would have killed most beings in the galaxy. The human looked at her. She knew she must have appeared strange to him. She was tall, over 2.5 meters, with silver skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face. Her arms were long and thin, and her fingers had an extra joint that most species found unsettling. The human did not seem unsettled. He looked at her with eyes that were tired but clear, eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything anymore. "Took you long enough," he said. His voice was rough from dehydration, but there was no fear in it. No gratitude either, which surprised her. Most beings who were rescued from certain death showed some emotion. This human showed nothing but a cold, patient calculation. "You are remarkably calm for someone who nearly died," Yuna said. "Nearly counts for nothing," the human replied. "Either you die or you don't. I didn't." Yuna helped him to his feet. He was shorter than her, with a lean body covered in scars. Old wounds marked his arms and chest, telling a story of violence that she could not yet read. He moved with a limp, favoring his left leg, but his movements were controlled and precise. "What is your name?" she asked. "Taiho," he said. "Sergeant Taiho, if ranks matter to you." "They don't matter much to me anymore." "What were you doing in this system, Sergeant Taiho?" He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved around the airlock, taking in details, analyzing escape routes and potential weapons. She recognized that look. She had seen it in predators across 100 worlds. "Running," he finally said. "From what? It doesn't matter." "Running to what? I don't know." "Does it matter?" "It might," Yuna said. "I am Ambassador Yuna of the Valori Collective. I have been searching for someone for a very long time." "Someone like me?" "I did not know what I was searching for until I found it." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My people are dying, Sergeant. We are caught in a war we cannot win, between enemies we cannot fight. I was sent to find a champion, someone who could do what we cannot." Taiho laughed. It was a short, bitter sound with no joy in it. "I'm no champion, Ambassador. I'm just a soldier who got tired of following orders. And yet you survived when survival was impossible. You fought when fighting was pointless. You refused to die when death was certain." Yuna leaned closer, her 4 eyes fixed on his two. "That is exactly what I need." Taiho studied her for a long moment. She could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, calculating risks and rewards, weighing his options with the same precision he had used to navigate the asteroid field. "Tell me about this war," he said finally. "Tell me everything." And Yuna knew, with a certainty that her species rarely felt, that she had found what she was looking for. She had found her champion. The galaxy was about to learn what one human could do. The council chamber of the Valori Collective was the most beautiful room Taiho had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, changing colors with the mood of the room. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars above in perfect clarity. The floor was polished stone that had been walked on for 10,000 years. Taiho did not care about any of it. He had learned long ago that beautiful places often hid ugly truths. The council sat in a half-circle before him, 12 elders with silver skin and ancient eyes. They were old, so old that Taiho could not guess their ages. The Valori lived for 300 years, and these 12 had seen centuries of history pass like pages in a book. They looked at him with curiosity and doubt, and something that might have been hope. Yuna stood beside him, translating when needed, though the council's universal translator worked well enough. She had spent the journey explaining the war to him, showing him maps and battle reports, introducing him to the enemies he would face. The hegemony was a machine of conquest. They believed that order came from control, and control came from power. Their ships were massive, bristling with weapons, crewed by soldiers who followed orders without question. Their generals planned wars like chess games, sacrificing pieces to gain advantages, never caring about the cost in lives. The Dominion was something worse. They bred soldiers in vats, growing them from genetic templates designed for war. These soldiers felt no fear, no doubt, no mercy. They existed only to fight and die for masters they would never meet. The Dominion believed that strength was the only truth, and weakness was a sin to be punished. Between these two giants, the Valori were nothing. A small people caught in a great storm, with no weapons to fight and no place to run. Counselor Bora, the eldest of the elders, leaned forward in her seat. Her voice was thin with age but sharp with intelligence. Ambassador, Yuna speaks highly of you, human. She says you survived an impossible situation through nothing but will and skill. I survived because dying wasn't an option, Taiho said. His voice was flat, emotionless. That's not special. That's just what soldiers do. Tell us of your experience, another counselor said. What wars have you fought? What enemies have you faced? Taiho was silent for a moment. The memories came whether he wanted them or not. Mountains covered in snow and blood. The sound of gunfire echoing through valleys. The faces of friends who did not come home. I served in something called the Special Warfare Command, he said finally. We did the jobs that regular soldiers couldn't do. Infiltration, sabotage, assassination. We went places we weren't supposed to go and did things we weren't supposed to do. And your record? Bora asked. Sealed by my government. Most of what I did never officially happened. Yuna spoke up then, her voice carrying across the chamber. I investigated as much as I could, counselor. The records are hidden, but rumors remain. According to those rumors, Sergeant Taiho once held a mountain pass for 4 days against 200 enemy soldiers. He was the only survivor on either side. The council exchanged glances. Taiho saw the doubt in their eyes. 200 soldiers was nothing compared to the millions that fought in this galactic war. He was one man against empires that could destroy planets. The hegemony has ships that can burn worlds, said a young counselor whose name Taiho had already forgotten. The Dominion has soldiers bred for nothing but combat. What can one human do against such power? Taiho had been waiting for this question. He had spent the journey thinking about his answer, turning it over in his mind until he knew exactly what to say. I don't need to beat your enemies, he said. I need to make them believe they can't beat me. There's a difference. The council murmured among themselves. Taiho could see they did not understand. They thought war was about numbers and weapons, about fleets and armies clashing in the void. They did not understand what war really was. War is not about strength, Taiho continued. It's about will. The side that wins is the side that refuses to break. I have seen massive armies run from smaller forces because their will shattered. I have seen fortresses fall without a shot being fired because the defenders lost hope. Your enemies have weapons, yes, but weapons are nothing without the will to use them. Wow. And you have this will? Bora asked. I have nothing else, Taiho said. Everything else was taken from me. My home, my friends, my future. All I have left is the ability to keep fighting when fighting makes no sense. That's what you need. Not a warrior, not a general. You need someone who will not stop, no matter what. The chamber fell silent. The crystals in the walls pulsed slowly, their light dimming as the mood in the room grew heavy. Finally, Bora spoke again. What do you require? Ships? Soldiers? Weapons? Keep them, Taiho said. Ships can be tracked. Soldiers can be killed. Weapons can be countered. He paused, letting his words sink in. Give me intelligence. Give me maps. Give me every secret your spies have gathered about these empires. Give me one ship fast enough to run when running is necessary. That is all? One more thing. Taiho turned to look at Yuna. She met his gaze with her 4 silver eyes, her expression unreadable. Give me Ambassador Yuna. She's the only one here who understands what I am. Yuna's eyes widened slightly. Taiho had not discussed this with her. He had made the decision during the council's questions, watching her reactions, seeing how she processed information. Why her? Bora asked. Because she found me, Taiho said. She looked at every warrior species in the galaxy and chose a broken human from a backwater planet. That means she sees something others don't. I need someone who can see what I see. The council debated among themselves in their own language, voices rising and falling like music. Taiho waited. He had learned patience in the mountains, waiting for hours in the snow for the right moment to strike. He could wait now. Finally, Bora turned back to him. Ambassador Yuna, do you accept this assignment? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Taiho watched her face, looking for any sign of doubt. He found none. Only that same calculating intelligence he had seen when she first rescued him. I accept, she said. I chose this human. I will see my choice through to the end. Taiho felt something shift in his chest. He'd been alone for so long, fighting battles that no one else understood, carrying burdens that no one else could share. Now someone was choosing to stand beside him. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. He did not know how to feel about that. He was not sure he could feel anything anymore. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he had thought was dead, something flickered to life. Then it is decided, Bora said. Sergeant Taiho, you will be the champion of the Valori Collective. Ambassador Yuna will accompany you as our representative. May the stars guide your path. Taiho did not believe in stars or guides or destiny. He believed in bullets and blood and the cold mathematics of survival. But he nodded anyway, because that was what they needed to see. As he and Yuna left the council chamber, she walked close beside him. You surprised me, she said quietly. Why did you ask for me? Because you looked at me and saw a weapon, Taiho said. Most people look at me and see a monster. A weapon can be used. A monster just destroys. I need someone who knows the difference. Yuna was silent for a moment. Then she said, What are you planning? I'm going to teach 2 empires what fear really means, Taiho said. And you're going to help me do it. They walked together into the stars, and the galaxy trembled without knowing why. The Korath Nebula was the most beautiful place in the galaxy to die. Purple clouds of gas stretched across light years, glowing with the light of newborn stars. Radiation painted patterns in the void, creating curtains of color that would have taken a human breath away. Ancient asteroids drifted through the mist, carrying minerals that could fuel civilizations. None of the soldiers gathered there noticed the beauty. They were too busy preparing to kill each other. 1,800 warships filled the nebula, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The hegemony had brought 900 vessels from every corner of their empire, their hulls black as midnight, their weapons hungry for blood. The Dominion had matched them ship for ship, Their silver fleet carrying soldiers bred from birth to know nothing but war. This was it. The final battle. The end of a conflict that had lasted 100 years and cost billions of lives. Whoever won today would control Valori space forever. Whoever lost would fade into history. And in the center of it all, invisible among the giants, a small Valori courier ship drifted silently through the chaos. "You cannot possibly defeat them," Una said, staring at the tactical display. Ships surrounded them on all sides, enough firepower to destroy planets. "There are 1,800 warships out there. We have one ship with no weapons. I'm not going to defeat them," Taiho said. He was calm, calmer than she had ever seen him. His eyes were clear, his hands steady, his breathing slow and even. "I'm going to end them." "How?" Taiho pulled up a series of files on his personal terminal. Personnel records, communication intercepts, private messages that should have been impossible to obtain. He had spent months collecting this information, piecing together a picture that no one else could see. "The Hegemony Supreme Commander is named Junsu," Taiho said. "He's been fighting this war for 40 years. He's won 100 battles, conquered a dozen worlds, killed more beings than he can count. He's the most successful military leader in Hegemony history." "I know who he is," Una said. "What does that matter?" "His daughter is dying." Taiho's voice was soft, almost sad. "A genetic illness, rare and incurable, attacking her nervous system piece by piece. There is only one treatment in the galaxy that could save her, and it was developed by the Dominion." Una's 4 eyes widened. "He requested the treatment?" "Begged for it." Commander Junsu, the Butcher of Worlds, wrote personal letters to the Dominion High Marshal asking for medicine for his little girl. He offered money, territory, military secrets. He offered everything he had, and they refused. The High Marshal is named Minho. His son died 20 years ago in a Hegemony bombardment. A bombardment that Commander Junsu ordered personally. Taiho's expression was unreadable. Minho refused the treatment out of revenge. He could have saved the child's life and chose not to, because her father had killed his son. The implications hung in the air like poison. "Both armies think they're fighting for their empires," Taiho continued. "They think their leaders are heroes, noble warriors defending their people against evil. But the truth is uglier. The truth is that this war has been prolonged for profit. That soldiers have been sacrificed for defense contracts. That the people in charge care more about vengeance and power than about the lives under their command. You have proof of this?" "I have everything." Taiho turned to face her fully. "I have records of secret negotiations where both sides agreed to keep fighting so their weapon manufacturers could stay rich. I have lists of battles that were deliberately lost to justify budget increases. I have the names of every soldier who died not for victory, but for profit." Una understood then. She understood what Taiho was going to do, and she felt her heart turn cold with the horror of it. "You're going to tell them," she whispered. "You're going to tell everyone. Every ship, every soldier, every being on both sides of this war." Taiho began broadcasting on all frequencies, open channels, and encrypted lines, personal communicators and fleet-wide systems. His voice reached 1,800 ships and millions of soldiers simultaneously. "To the warriors of the Hegemony and the Dominion," he said, "I am the human. You know my name. You know what I have done. Now hear the truth that your leaders have hidden from you." He transmitted everything. The corruption, the secret deals, the lists of soldiers sacrificed for profit, the letters from Commander Junsu begging for his daughter's life, the cold refusal from High Marshal Minho, every ugly truth that had been buried under medals and propaganda. For 3 minutes, every ship in both fleets listened in silence. Then the chaos began. On the Hegemony flagship, junior officers confronted their commanders with tears in their eyes. They had lost friends in battles that now seemed meaningless, fought for leaders who had never deserved their loyalty. Some demanded answers. Some demanded blood. On the Dominion vessels, soldiers bred for obedience found something stronger than programming. They found rage. They had been created to die for masters who saw them as nothing but tools, who would let children suffer because of old grudges. For the first time in their lives, they felt the heat of anger burning through their conditioning. The first mutiny happened within 10 minutes. A hegemony cruiser, its crew refusing to follow orders from officers they no longer trusted. Then another. Then another. The Dominion fleet began to fracture as soldiers turned on their handlers, demanding explanations that could not be given. Weapons that had been pointed at the enemy turned inward, threatening those who had held their leashes. Commander Junsu tried to restore order, but his voice no longer carried authority. How could soldiers follow a man who had begged their enemies for mercy while sending them to die? How could they believe in a cause that had been sold for profit? High Marshal Minho attempted to regain control through force, but force required soldiers willing to fight. His soldiers were not willing. They looked at him and saw not a leader, but a man who had let a child die to satisfy his pride. Yuna watched the chaos unfold on their sensors. Ships that had been moving information began to drift apart. Weapons that had been charging powered down. Communications filled with shouting, crying, and the sound of structures that had stood for centuries finally collapsing. "You didn't fire a single weapon," she said quietly. "You didn't kill a single soldier." "I didn't need to," Taiho replied. His voice was tired, so tired. "I just showed them the truth. The killing they did to themselves." The war did not end with a treaty that day. Treaties required leaders who still held power, and power had evaporated like morning mist. The war ended because soldiers on both sides simply stopped fighting. They looked at their enemies across the void and saw not monsters, but victims of the same lies. Some ships returned home to demand changes from their governments. Some soldiers laid down their weapons and walked away from military life forever. Some turned their ships toward new horizons, seeking lives far from the empires that had used them. The hegemony and the dominion did not fall that day, but they cracked, deep fractures running through their foundations, damage that would take generations to repair, or that might never heal at all. And in the center of it all, a small Vellery ship slipped away into the nebula, carrying a broken human and the ambassador who had chosen him. 3 weeks later, Yuna found Taiho on a small moon at the edge of Vellery space. He was sitting on a rocky cliff, watching a binary sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Two suns sinking toward the horizon, their light mixing and blending into something neither could create alone. "The council wants to honor you," she said, sitting beside him. "They're calling you the savior of the collective. They want to give you medals, territories, anything you desire." "I don't want to be saved," Taiho said. His voice was hoarse, rough with exhaustion. "And I'm no savior. I just know how to break things. Armies, empires, faith." He looked at his hands, scarred and calloused from years of war. "Myself." Yuna reached out and took one of those hands in her own. Her silver fingers intertwined with his, the touch unfamiliar but somehow right. "Then let me help you rebuild," she said. Taiho looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time she saw past the soldier, past the legend, past the monster that the galaxy feared. She saw a man who had given everything he had, who had burned himself down to ashes to light a fire that would end the war. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I chose you," Yuna said simply. "On that day in the asteroid field, when I watched you refuse to die, I chose you. Not just as a weapon, not just as a champion. I chose you as something worth saving." "You don't know what I've done," Taiho said. "The lives I've taken, the families I've destroyed. I'm not worth saving. That is not your decision to make. Yuna squeezed his hand gently. You showed 2 empires the truth about their leaders. Let me show you the truth about yourself. You are more than your war, Taiho. You are more than your pain. And you deserve a chance to discover who you can be when you stop fighting. Taiho was silent for a long moment. The suns continued to sink, their light fading slowly toward night. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, distant and cold, but somehow comforting. I don't know how to stop, he admitted finally. His voice cracked, the first sign of vulnerability she had ever seen from him. Fighting is all I know. It's all I've been for so long. Then we will learn together, Yuna said. We will find a place far from wars and empires. We will build something new. And when the old fears come back, when the nightmares whisper that you are only good for destruction, I will be there to remind you of the truth. What truth? That you are human, Yuna said. That humans can break armies and shatter empires, yes. But they can also heal. They can also grow. They can also love. She paused, her 4 eyes meeting his too. Let me show you. Taiho looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he leaned against her shoulder. It was a small gesture, tiny compared to the great things he had done. But it was also the bravest thing he had ever done. It was trust. It was hope. It was the first step toward an after he had never believed he would have. The sun set below the horizon, and darkness wrapped around them like a blanket. Above, the stars turned slowly, indifferent to the small drama playing out on the moon below. The war was over. The legend of the human would spread across the galaxy for generations, growing with each telling until it became something like a myth. Soldiers would whisper his name around campfires, wondering if he had been real or just a story made to frighten children. But Taiho was done being a legend. He was done being a weapon, a monster, a nightmare wrapped in human skin. Now came the harder part. Now came the healing. Now came learning to live. And he would not face it alone. Yuna held his hand as the stars wheeled overhead, and together they watched the darkness give way to dawn. And in the center of it all, a small Velori ship slipped away into the nebula, carrying a broken human and the ambassador who had chosen him. 3 weeks later, Yuna found Taiho on a small moon at the edge of Velori space. He was sitting on a rocky cliff, watching a binary sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. 2 suns sinking toward the horizon, their light mixing and blending into something neither could create alone. The council wants to honor you, she said, sitting beside him. They're calling you the savior of the collective. They want to give you medals, territories, anything you desire. I don't want to be saved, Taiho said. His voice was hoarse, rough with exhaustion. And I'm no savior. I just know how to break things, armies, empires, faith. He looked at his hands, scarred and calloused from years of war. Myself. Yuna reached out and took one of those hands in her own. Her silver fingers intertwined with his, the touch unfamiliar, but somehow right. Then let me help you rebuild, she said. Taiho looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time she saw past the soldier, past the legend, past the monster that the galaxy feared. She saw a man who had given everything he had, who had burned himself down to ashes to light a fire that would end the war. Why? He asked. Why would you do that? Because I chose you, Yuna said simply. On that day in the asteroid field, when I watched you refuse to die, I chose you. Not just as a weapon, not just as a champion. I chose you as something worth saving. You don't know what I've done, Taiho said. The lives I've taken, the families I've destroyed. I'm not worth saving. That is not your decision to make. Yuna squeezed his hand gently. You showed 2 empires the truth about their leaders. Let me show you the truth about yourself. You are more than your war, Taiho. You are more than your pain. And you deserve a chance to discover who you can be when you stop fighting. Taiho was silent for a long moment. The suns continued to sink, their light fading slowly toward night. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, distant and cold, but somehow comforting. I don't know how to stop, he admitted finally. His voice cracked, the first sign of vulnerability she had ever seen from him. Fighting is all I know. It's all I've been for so long. Then we will learn together, Yuna said. We will find a place far from wars and empires. We will build something new. And when the old fears come back, when the nightmares whisper that you are only good for destruction, I will be there to remind you of the truth. What truth? That you are human, Yuna said. That humans can break armies and shatter empires, yes. But they can also heal. They can also grow. They can also love. She paused, her 4 eyes meeting his 2. Let me show you. Taiho looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he leaned against her shoulder. It was a small gesture, tiny compared to the great things he had done. But it was also the bravest thing he had ever done. It was trust. It was hope. It was the first step toward an after he had never believed he would have. The sun set below the horizon, and darkness wrapped around them like a blanket. Above, the stars turned slowly, indifferent to the small drama playing out on the moon below. The war was over. The legend of the human would spread across the galaxy for generations, growing with each telling until it became something like a myth. Soldiers would whisper his name around campfires, wondering if he had been real or just a story made to frighten children. But Taiho was done being a legend. He was done being a weapon, a monster, a nightmare wrapped in human skin. Now came the harder part. Now came the healing. Now came learning to live. And he would not face it alone. Yuna held his hand as the stars wheeled overhead, and together they watched the darkness give way to dawn.